my microphone out of view. And welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. My name is Michelle, aka The Ignited Teacher. Here on social media, that will be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think that's social media now. Then, what else? Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can catch me on Reddit too. I'm there as well. So, welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. If you're new here, thank you for tuning in for this Teaching Tip Tuesday. And if you're one that catches me on the replay or catches me live, thank you for being a part of my community. So, if you cannot catch me live on Twitter or Facebook, you can always catch me live or on the replay on YouTube. All you have to do is search for The Ignited Teacher. I'm the only one on there, and you can find me there. And all of my Teaching Tip Tuesdays are housed there for the foreseeable future. And you can, if you miss one and you can't find it, my live streams I pin them to the post of the top of my profiles, but sometimes when they get unpinned, because the feed is ever changing, they actually get pushed down into the feed. So if you can't find it, you can hop on over to YouTube and find me there. So let's go ahead and get started with this evening's topic, which is graphic organizers to teach concepts that are similar. So if you find yourself with that issue, your kids getting confused with concepts that are similar in nature. For example, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking factors and multiples. So over the years, I've heard kids call the greatest common multiple, the least common factor, all of those things because they're similar in nature. Also, simplifying fractions and generating equivalent fractions. Those can be similar kinds of concepts which cause common misconceptions. Because when I was a fifth grade teacher, I always knew that these were going to be topics that were issues. Also, using multiplication in division, that's going to be an issue all the time anyway, all as well. So a lot of my students would struggle with using multiplication with the division. So I had to come up with a strategy, and a T-chart was a very good solution. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight may not be new to you all, but it's new to some people who deal with kids that are struggling. So my students struggle a lot, and graphic organizer not just for vocabulary, they're for concepts as well. They're probably used more often in text-based subjects, not for subjects that like math or even concepts like math. So they're not just for vocabulary. Graphic organizers, hence the word organizer, is used to help kids organize information. And that's what I'm going to say because they can be used in different contexts. So I'm going to look here. Let me scoot over. Now, this is a graphic organizer that I use with problem solving. And some of my students, I had them, depending on what their deficit area was, I used it to organized problem solving. So they would have data and details and then the facts. So it just depended on what the students needed. And sometimes I would use this T-chart to do predictions. And then What does the text say? I predict, but the text says, or the problem says. So, kind of taking them back to the reading part to help them with that. That was one of the things that the students struggled with. It just depended on, but it was helping them to organize their thought process. Then there's the traditional bubble map. Some teachers for upper grade levels, they may prefer the bubble map. I do. I prefer it for my students over the Venn diagram. I have the double bubble map where I would actually similarities and differences with your factors and multiples. What is a factor? What do they have in common? Just those different things to help the kids as we go into those concepts that you know that you're going to be confusing. So friendly numbers is something that I use with rounding because my students always came with deficit areas in rounding because the rounding was taught in a way that did not, or I was not able to extend their learning from that what the teacher taught in the previous grade level because they were taught the 4 or more, raise the score, 5 or less, let it rest, but it wasn't sound mathematics because in 5th grade we have to teach them to round decimals. And if they did not know or didn't have any, what's the word I'm looking for? If they didn't have any exposure to the number line and they were taught these tricks and these things, I had to go back and teach them. So I would introduce them to friendly numbers first. Then there's the T chart with multiplication, and that's what I was talking about on my entry or intro. I was talking about how my students already knew that multiplication is what is and was always an issue for my students. But who has time to go back and teach the kids multiplication facts? A lot of teachers get caught up, especially with kids that struggle. Well, they don't know their facts. Well, you can't teach them in 9 months because you have a whole curriculum to teach. So, what I used to do is because I had to teach multiplicative patterns anyway, I used the multiplication chart to teach my students how to find what they needed for division. And similarly it worked. Now we had some issues where the kids would add incorrectly every now and again, but if they had somewhere to organize their multiplication facts, it made it easier. And it got so much, I like one group I had, they struggled so much with it that I actually had to label where the multiplication sign, it goes at the top, and then where the 13 was, I put bottom because they were struggling with where to put the numbers. And I had to really transition my kids to the standard algorithm because in middle school, if they are not proficient with their algorithm, they're going to fail pretty much because middle school teachers have a higher student population that they teach. They have more students, and I always wanted my 5th grade students to be able to thrive in middle school. So that was one of my goals for my students, is to pretty much make sure that they had this cemented in their minds. So that multiplication chart was one thing that I used. So what I'm going to do is, let me see, I'm going to show you how it can be used. Let me see. Let me get it disconnected. So let me go ahead and pop this on. So this is my iPad. Hold on one second. Out there. Hold on. There we go. So let me go ahead and pull up my whiteboard. So what happens is with similar concepts for your, let's say, factors and multiples, I will use a double bubble map. And some people are saying, well, why don't you use the Venn diagram? Well, I don't use the Venn diagram. For younger kids, yes, but the double bubble map is more specific, and I can get more specific about how many spokes I want on my double bubble map. So what I would do, and I used to teach my kids how to draw these. It took some time. It never was perfect. And so this is what that double bubble map looks like. So we will put differences. And sorry, my hand's sloppy. Similar. And that's how we would work that. And then, if we would put factors here and then your multiples here. And then we will work it like that. And let me erase this because this is in the wrong spot. I pushed it over too far, my iPad. So this is similar and this is different. So when they fill out the chart, they know, or the map, double bubble map, they know that they have to come up with three actual things. And there's really three things that I'm really looking for. Factors are the two numbers that can be multiplied together. A multiple, I want them to be able to say, hey, I'm skip counting. They can use that. Factors begin with, if you're going to put them in order from least to greatest, it begins with 1. And then the multiples, if you're going to put them in order from least to greatest, the multiple begins with the number itself. So you try to help the kids differentiate between the two concepts because they're so similar that they get confused. I know on the STAR test, they would list them out. So say for instance, they would have 12, and they would just list them out. So 12 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And then they would have a list of multiples. They would have 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. And the students would have to differentiate between what is a group of factors, and what is a group of multiples. Well, when you look at these, this will tell you that these are factors. And because this begins with that 2, and you're skip counting, those are multiples. But you have to give the students something that they can differentiate themselves or their thinking, because these concepts are so similar. And when I say similar, they're really, really similar. Another one is prime and composite. These, when I say the students get confused with them all the time, but it goes back to what a their multiplication deficit is. So what you do is you have them organize it in a T chart. And that's what I used to do with my students. And then I used to do the Silva Eratosthenes, where we would do that with the hundreds chart and shake out prime and composite numbers. And that's one of the things that I definitely use with my students. Another good one is the tree map. The tree map can be used for geometry. So, like if you're classifying attributes, so if you want to talk about the attributes of a square, and normally this has this here, you can say a square has four edges. And then you could also go further and say the edges create what? Right angles. No, you can't see that. Let me. So the edges, not the edges, corners. I don't know why my brain is moving slow tonight. The corners create right angles. So if you're talking about those different attributes, which our kids struggle with anyway, you might want to use some of these graphic organizers for the students to actually gather their thoughts, take what they know, and kind of organize it in a way that makes sense to them. And it's something that they can actually use. So you have the tree map. You can use prime and composite in a T chart. You have where you can use your double bubble map. My hand is all messy. To differentiate between the two concepts that are really similar, and then there are common misconceptions that students have over and over again. So if you plan for these and start that unit with these graphic organizers, I promise you it'll make your life a lot easier, and you will be able to go through your lesson a lot smoother because you're anticipating those difficulties that your students are going to have, instead of letting the difficulty derail your lesson, if that makes sense. So, graphic organizers, like I said, I used to teach my students how to draw them because I taught with interactive notebooks, and they just drew them, and I kept my own interactive notebook for my classes as well. So, I would draw one, they would draw it. I never really gave my students a lot of ditto sheets because at the end of the day, they need to write, and it helps with organization. A lot of my students came to fifth grade, were very unorganized, and that's one of the things that I try to help them with is their organization skills. So I hope that you found these tips helpful for your students that may not be able to differentiate their these concepts that are real similar, equivalent fractions, prime and composite numbers, multiples, and really just trying to understand what attributes of a square are. There are so many different things that you can use with just the graphic organizers that I used tonight. So the Math Intervention Academy, which is something that I have launched. I think I launched it in September, and it's open for enrollment. It's open until the end of the year. And hi, Michelle. I will be starting geometry in January. I'll definitely be using graphic organizers for shape. Yes, it definitely helps because our kid, I can tell you right now, geometry, a lot of it is just understanding that good old vocabulary. And they definitely struggle with it. Even my fifth graders, just basic shapes. Yep. So the Math Intervention Academy is open until the end of the month. I'm going to be advertising it, and then I'll close it in December. I know that teachers are trying to shut the school year down, especially with this whole coronavirus thing, to give you some time to enroll. Some of the things that I have presented tonight, I will be teaching this and teaching you how to use these different organizers, these teaching tips, things that I know work with students that struggle to help make your life easier. So it's kind of like if you know a pothole is coming, and instead of getting ready to go around the pothole, you actually run into it and then you have a flat tire. That's kind of like what not anticipating what students are going to struggle with or having a plan in place or some interventions for those students. So the math intervention is new. You can join quarterly for $18 quarterly every 3 months. It's a low enrollment. This is actually the founders enrollment. Next year I will be going up on the price because I want to get as many teachers in at that low price is $6 a month, and I add new content every year. Every month. The goal of the Math Intervention Academy is to teach teachers a system, not a program, because if you follow my blog posts, systems and programs for intervention are totally different. This is a system of how to consistently close gaps, get kids on grade level as quickly as possible with tips and not tricks that actually work, and really good content knowledge to help you understand how math connects. Math is a subject that it builds. And because I have taught several grade levels, I've taught math at the elementary, middle, and now at the high school, my lens is a lot wider than most. And then I taught reading. So I think I feel like I'm a dying breed because nobody teaches self-contained anymore, and except for at the lower levels, and most people are departmentalized. So I take what I know about reading, what I know about students that struggle, and put it into this Math Intervention Academy to be something that teachers can use and eventually school districts can use to quickly get kids on grade level and get their teachers some good math content knowledge. So if you're interested in this, you can hop on over to the mathinterventionacademy.com and get more information there. So I hope that you enjoyed this Teaching Tip Tuesday. Don't forget, if you are looking at this on the replay, to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you know some teachers that will that would benefit from this information, and they'll have to join the Math Intervention Academy. They could subscribe to my YouTube channel, get free content, my blog posts, if it helps them that way. But I want to have more teachers have access to good math pedagogy, because there are a lot of new teachers that are on campuses that it's kind of like they're struggling without the support that they need. So that's all I have for you all tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all in my next live stream.